So as we all know, 8th of March is International Women's Day. So again, happy Women's Day, everyone. So as Nairobi Garage, we decided that we'll create a space where women come together and discuss life issues. This year's theme is Break the Bias, right? I hope we all know that. Break the bias, and that means different things to every single person. So what we decided to do is pick certain topics about that affect women in business and in leadership, and get people who've been there, done that, so that they can come and share their story with us.
I'll start by saying, first of all, thank you for giving me your time and allowing me to speak whatever little I know about leaning in. The first time I read this book was 8 years ago. Now, for context, 8 years ago, I was living in South Sea in an SQ, right? That babe is the person who read Lean In. So Lean In was a very abstract concept for me because the way Sheryl Sandberg was explaining what being a female leader was, please, me, I just wanted ugali mboga at the end of the day. But as I look back 8 years on from that time, I realized that I have been leaning in, whether consciously or subconsciously. And I have been able to somehow find my way into the position of MD for East Africa. And how did I do that? I leaned into opportunities, right? When an opportunity came, I was able to quickly realize that it was an opportunity and run with it. Was it that clear cut for me? No. Sometimes it's pressure. You have bills to pay, and an opportunity comes and you jump right in. First of all, it was photography. I wasn't a trained photographer, but Mwangi Kirubi took me under his wing, and I decided to be a photographer for 2 years, until I lost a very prominent woman's birthday photos, and I realized it wasn't for me. Right? The other thing, and I'll try to go quickly simply because of time, I don't want Sharon to kill me, is leaning into vulnerability. Now, I'll speak now from the perspective of the MD. I came to this role knowing nothing. Absolutely nothing about what it takes to be an MD. I woke up one day and I was like, I need to go back to Nakuru, because that's where I'm from. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I need to go back to Nakuru. But I realized I'm not the first person to do this job, right? I had to be vulnerable, not just with outside. It had to start within. I had to tell myself, for Moyo, what got you here is not what will keep you here. And what leadership does, it's a pressure cooker. It will amplify your strength, but where it will also amplify your weaknesses. So you really need to lean into that vulnerability. And I did. It made me very clear about where I was lacking. I didn't do well with anxiety. I'm now in therapy. I am not good with learning with financial topics. My CFO is now my tutor, right? I don't know a lot about business strategy, right? Guess what I did? I'm taking a course online from Oxford that will inform how I build this business, because at the end of the day, I am responsible for turning this business around. And I am vulnerable there, so I have to pay attention to those things. And then the last thing is leaning into authenticity, right? I am like this every day, very bubbly, very excitable, very easygoing. But the examples of leadership, except for one, Manish, I was so authoritarian, right? He yells from me, and you have to show up at attention. Oh my God, if your boss calls you, start shaking like this. And that wasn't me. So I wanted to show up as myself. I wanted for people who interact with me and my leadership style to experience me the way I am. I didn't want to put on airs. I wanted to say, if I'm struggling today, I'm having a bad day, I will go and tell my HODs, today is not a good day, and this is why I'm struggling. Let's figure it out together. I am the first person to tell my HODs when they come to the office with problems. Even me, I don't know. Let's sit down, let's figure it out together. I'm not going to show up as a know-it-all. That is not my authentic self. I am on a journey, and this is a journey we are on together.
As Sharon said, I'm here to talk about myths that we learn as women that hold us back in the office and in the workplace. So I'm going to make this a bit interactive. So put your hand up if you've ever been in a meeting with men and you've been asked to take notes. Wow, all of us. Put your hand up if you've ever not applied for a job because you don't have 100% of the qualifications. So let's talk about those myths. I think it'd be good to just examine them. So number one, the one that I wanted to highlight is women and us not liking the top job. and our fear of the fact that when we get to the top, we will lose some elements of ourselves, or we'll lose some elements of our lives. We won't be there for our children, for our husbands. We won't be able to show up in all the realms that we manage on a day-to-day basis. I believe this is a myth. I think there are several female leaders out there who have actually disproved this particular myth. And it's something that we can take upon ourselves to actually show and prove that it's possible to actually do it all, to actually be the leader that leads women and that leads teams and does it in an authentic and a sustainable manner. Myth number 2, women don't help each other. You know, we've all heard this statement, right? There's that lady who has the corner office, and you know, she got there and she fought for it, and she's a strong woman, and you're like, wow, one day I want to be like her, right? But you're so scared of going to talk to her because you know, if you are going to ask her anything, she'll be like, I fought my way up here. Why don't you do the same? I got everything I got through my own hard work. Go and do it yourself, right? So I think the way we can break that myth as women is actually to be the opposite of that. Actually to reach out to each other, you know, throw a hand down the ladder and actually pull some people up so that as you go up, they also come up with you. Thanks. I get asked a lot of the time, you know, how do you switch from being a communicator to a regulatory person? And I say there's actually some skills which I brought with me into my new role. Communication is all about being able to package a story. It's about being able to explain sometimes very complex ideas in a very simple way to people. And that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. I bring those ideas, I explain them to the regulator. It's just that my audience is a little different, so it's not media or social, you know, on social media. It's actually regulators and government people. And learning to work at their pace is also, of course, another lesson I've had to get to know. Lots of women think that technology is a man's space. You know, you have to be an engineer, you have to be able to climb the towers, you know, you have to be able to work all types of hours because the network never sleeps and therefore you shouldn't either. And it's quite the opposite. I think we're finding that as we go out and actually seek more women to bring them into the company, we're finding that these are actually the best leaders for us. There's a stat I was reading the other day, which says that women, when they come into the workplace, tend to do more than their job, unlike men. We tend to actually participate in, you know, groups and circles where we actually try and grow each other, where we try and pass on learnings, very much like what we're doing today. Males typically will not do that. So when you bring a woman into your company, you're actually diversifying the thought. You're actually creating a more sustainable pipeline for talent because they know who's out there and they know how to bring that person up, as opposed to when you have typically just all-male leadership. So I think that's another myth that we can debunk, that only some sectors are reserved for men, and that, you know, that's the only way you can get forward.
I'm going to talk about how to get noticed and how to leave an impact in the boardroom. The first one, I think, is being confident. I think a lot of us, when we walk into a room, we walk with our head bowed down. As women, you're thinking, oh, this boobs of mine, is my brow okay? Is my hair fine? Whenever, it's very hard to see a woman who will just strut in and, you know, well put together and just sit and be confident about what they're doing. Number 2, articulation. So you've built your confidence. How do you then start articulating everything that you need in this boardroom? Don't go there and say stories. Who's ever been in a room, you raised your hand, you gave an idea, people said, it's like you never spoke, they've moved on. And then somebody else gives the same idea and everybody's like, yeah. And you're like, what? Am I in Twilight Zone? I think I just said this, yeah? So you need to articulate. Maybe to get to your point, you went through so many rounds and circles and etc. Just be precise, short to the point, right? Number 3 is relationships. So it's very important to build that relationship, even with your board members. It's really critical. Don't just meet every quarter. Just, you know, reach out to someone. And for me, it's really important. Relationships are everything. And it kind of goes to what Wamoyo was talking about in leaning in. Because it's not about our jobs, our titles, it's about the people that we work with, right? And you need to build those relationships with them. Relationships are really, really critical.
What is self-love? Everyone has a version of what self-love is. So when you look at self-love, for me, it's an inner job. Yeah? When you look inwardly, what do you feel? What makes you feel like you're loving yourself? I would want all of us to think about that. So one of the questions I'll ask you, I can't tell you how to love yourself, but I can give you a journey of how I have learned to love me. I have had to do a lot of work. And that work is actually understanding when I feel overwhelmed, what emotion am I carrying? Is it sadness? Does that sadness become anger? Is it fear? And instead of asking why me, I have learned that I can actually also ask myself empowering questions. I'm a Christian by faith. And one of the things maybe I've even learned over the years, of the last 3 years, is asking myself, how about if I just use the verse that says everything that's happening to me is happening for my own good, versus asking why me? That for me is my self-love, where I look deeper within myself and I actually try to understand, can I actually find out why I'm feeling angry today? Can I find out why I'm resenting my leader today? So for all of us, we have to do that work. And always try and ask yourself, when you're feeling like I need to either go do my nails, those are things we should normalize as women, whether it's your hair. So when someone tells you that, maybe you need more self-love by going to braid your hair, actually, it's bigger than that, because all these other things, they fulfill the emptiness or the brokenness that we have within ourselves. So for me, what I would encourage each and every one of us is do the inner work. Be in alignment with who you are and who you desire to be.
I'm not an emotional intelligence expert, but I have had to deploy it in a lot of the work that I have done. And I've been in the tech and innovation space for, I'd say, about 12 years now actively. And so for me, the first thing I've learned about emotional intelligence is you can use it for good or you can use it for evil. How I got through my journey with emotional intelligence was I got to a point at work where I hated going in. I would wake up anxious, like my heart rate at rest was at 100, 120, just because I woke up and I thought to myself, I'm going into work. And for me, I had to deal with it. I knew that something was wrong, but it was so unnerving. It's like every day was an emotional day and I couldn't figure it out. And so like these superheroes, I also had to begin to think, what is happening and how do I harness it? Because I felt like a big bowl of emotions that I couldn't express. And so I had to, I went into counseling. Turned out, amongst other things, there was anxiety, there was depression. And so I went into counseling. And the other thing that I did was a mindfulness course with Google. But what these things did for me is they allowed me to understand what the situations were that were getting me to where I was getting so anxious and so on. And I learned exercises to be able to harness them. And really what emotional intelligence is when you get to that point where you're able to harness other people's emotions and harness your emotions and then begin to use them and use those situations, in my experience, for good. And so I guess just finally, I encourage you to don't waste your womanhood and use it to your advantage in the workplace. Because again, we're so incredibly talented just by virtue of how we have been placed on this earth and the work that we have to do. And it would be a disservice to our families, to our friends, and to our colleagues to not use what we have been given. And if you're a Christian, what you have been given by God. And if you're not, what you've been given by the universe. But ultimately, it is what you have been given. It is your superpower that you need to use every day that you wake up. And so that is my encouragement to you, and thank you.
I just want to know, when you say you're emotionally intelligent, Sometimes, when do you draw the line that you're actually being exploited? You're no longer emotionally intelligent.
Being able to be emotionally intelligent doesn't mean that you now can take more crap from people. It means that you know when the crap is coming, and you know when to call it out and get out.
How do you put in boundaries as a woman to be seen as professional, being that you have such a respected role in what you called a male-dominated industry and sector? What is it that you do to make sure that you're able to blend that piece of being a woman and leaning into what's important there, but also being respected as a professional?
I actually leaned into it, and I have in my office what I call my candy corner. And I put just, basically chocolates, sweets, anything, and people come in and take them and move out. And I did that because I realized that with some people, there's a resistance to you as a woman, a female leader. So how do you open that up and make yourself a bit more approachable? So I kind of twisted it on its head and made it an entryway into my office. So if you want sweets, come in, let's have a chat, let's have a just informal chat about stuff. And you find that opens doors for you in ways that perhaps would not have been possible in other, if you've just strictly stuck to the fact that I'm a woman, I have to be here, I have to behave like the men do, and close those doors and just, kind of make it very formal and strict, yeah?
So how do you let go of things that you have already healed from so that you can start creating a new identity for yourself?
Maybe ask yourself, have I really let go? Because if it's still part of my identity, then there's a part of it that still owns me, right? And because if you know who you are, then that part of your identity that you don't like, but you are aware that exists, then you're able to deal with it. I think what you have to acknowledge is, and I say this a lot, even to my clients, is we cannot dismiss the experiences or the traumatic event that happened in your life. But we need to walk the journey of understanding that it no longer serves you. So is what you're holding on serving you or destroying you?